as we're going along, if anyone wants to share, if there's something that comes to mind, sharing is super helpful for getting other people to kind of think about things differently. Not just kind of thinking about what we need. Um, Sharing is caring, or something like that. I think that's the saying. So please do use the chat boxes when you need to. So, part two. Um, Last week was really about laying those foundations in place, um, starting to understand the old beliefs, old patterns, old stories, starting to familiarize ourselves with what our nervous system looks like, what sort of state it's in, how we can start to really work with it and start to heal it rather than feeling like we are just under the influence of it all the time, because that really is how dysregulation feels. It feels like we can't control it, or it feels like we're under the weight of it a lot of the time. And actually, we've got the control. We just need to learn how to work with it. So, with that in mind, this week is going to be more about filling in the gaps, giving some more practical tools to work with, starting to shift from this space of dysregulation in the moment to regulation in the moment so that we can really start to stretch our nervous systems. And also some of the astrology at play, this is where the receiving element of money and energy comes in. How open to receiving are we? What does it feel like to receive? Does receiving actually send us into a dysregulated state? Um, and how can we start to work with the astrology of our own natal chart to understand what we need to be supported, what we're actually wanting to spend money on, where are we being asked to spend our energy, and a reminder, we are looking at money, but all of this relates to energy in general. All of these things relate to your time, your energy, your effort, your communication, what you put your focus towards, not just money. So you can start to see it in a more diverse way as well. So as I say, last week we did that nervous system reactions, what reactions look like, old stories and beliefs, recognizing money wounds for awareness. So where are we a little bit sore, a little bit tender? What is it that keeps coming up? And we've already done what did we notice from week one. So specifically this week, once we know those cycles, we need to be putting things into place to support our own personal healing. Looking at some of the typical nervous system patterns to support healing. So I've got 3 examples for you, and I suspect we will probably all recognize all of them at some point within ourselves. Somatic safety. What does somatic safety and somatic support look like on the go? How can I really tune into my body and help my body discharge this energy rather than kind of using it in this dysregulated state and then not knowing what's going in, what's going out, and yeah, just really feeling into the body, being grounded in the body is going to be so, so important going forwards. Some practical and healthy financial tips and language and reframes, and the art of receiving, along with that nourishment from astrology. The art of receiving is one of my favorite topics to cover, whatever workshop I'm doing, because we are generally not so great at receiving. And you'll see from some of the examples as to what that means. So we're going to start with some of the common spending cycles that you might find yourself in from this energy leaking perspective. So the first one, which I personally think is probably the most common one that we will find ourselves in, or recognizing other people. I think sometimes we recognize things in other people before we necessarily recognize it in ourselves. So bear that in mind as we're going through some of these examples. If you see it in other people, are there more subtle ways that it might actually come into your practice as well? Because usually we see things that we need to look at. So the feast and famine cycle is that first one. This is classic spending, going all out, spending lots of money. I've got it in the bank, so I'm going to spend it all. And then spending it all and having this famine where you've got to panic, you've got to really tighten everything up. And it's this cycle that you might notice happening because it's coming from these dysregulated states. So when I'm in an anxious state, when I'm in a fight and flight state, I can spend, and it doesn't matter. I'm not really looking at it. I'm kind of avoiding it. I'm not really connected to the money, actually. It's going out so fast that I'm not even feeling it. It's just straight back out. And then when that happens, really having to tighten everything up and feeling not even anxious about it, feeling panicky about it, feeling really disconnected from it, and feeling really down that we've had all this money, we've got rid of all of this money, and now we've really got to tighten the purse strings again. And what happens with this state is we're actually doing it to feel. We feel something when we get rid of it, excitement, buzz, energy. Ooh, feels really exciting. And then when we've not got any, we're actually feeling that kind of panic that I'm not sure where the next bit is going to come from. And it's this cycle of emotion actually that we find ourselves in. And what I will very often see is within human design language, people with undefined solar plexus will fall into this pattern quite easily because they are constantly looking to feel something that it isn't the intensity of the emotions that they're picking up from their external environment. Or it's just people wanting to feel in general with an undefined emotional center. I need to feel something, so I'm going to use my money to do that. And we talked about that a little bit last week. So just notice whether you see that one in yourself. Are you familiar with that? What does that look like? How has that played out for you in the past? The second one is not the same as the first one because it doesn't do this loop, but it still has a little bit of an inkling of the feasting to it. Because the second energy leak is this impulse buying, panic buying, and emotional spending. So we've still got that emotional aspect behind it, but it's not doing the cycle. It's not doing the up and the down. It's just doing the up and the up and the up. And it's like these little spikes that come in. So spending when you're already dysregulated or creating dysregulation to spend. So maybe panic buying, impulse buying, creating this dysregulation, this anxiety in the body, or creating dysregulation when we spend. So the panic that comes after we've handed over the money. Noticing this is a regular sales tactic to get you spending, especially if you're a manifesting generator or a generator, is going to be super helpful. It works on everyone to a certain level. Creating a bit of pressure, creating a bit of panic to get people to part with their money. You can do it consciously to make people make decisions, because actually sometimes we need a bit of a poke and we need a bit of a prod to go in the right direction. And you will know yourself, when you've actually needed a bit of a push, you've needed a bit of an incentive to give over your money or to give over your energy in some sense. But just start to notice when that sales tactic is becoming a trigger. Do I actually need this thing? Is this going to give me value? Is this going to nourish me? Am I going to get something back from this? Or am I just panic spending without that conscious element behind it? Because that's really the key. We want to be spending consciously. We don't want to be panic buying. And you'll notice it all the time in techniques because it's part of the sales psychology. Create a bit of urgency, create a bit of panic. I use it sometimes in my emails to get people to actually recognize what is, going to be helpful for them, what are going to be good for them. Getting people to notice when their body is saying yes to something before their mind starts to talk them out of something that actually their body, their intuition is saying yes to. So there are healthy ways to do that, and there are healthy ways to kind of impulse buy or panic spend if your body is saying yes. But if your body is only reacting to the urgency of it and the panic of it, that's the trigger. Where am I buying into this thing that, I might never be able to get hold of it again? It might only be a limited amount. Do I actually want it, is the question. Is this going to give me anything? Is this going to give me value? Is my body saying yes, or am I just panicking? And an easy way to get around this, just wait a few hours. It's probably not going to run out in a few hours. Usually people who are using these conscious techniques give people a good few weeks to make the decision, or a good week to make the decision so people can sleep on it. They're not having to make it straight away. Give yourself a day to decide. Set an alarm on your phone. At this time tomorrow, I'm going to have decided what I'm doing with that. How I feel about it is important. What my body says about it is important. And do I actually want it? Now, the third one, I don't think Jess is on this week's, but this was what she was talking about last week. If you were on the call last week, she was talking about a parcel a day keeps the doctor away, I think was her was her saying. And the third one really is that dripping tap. So this dysregulation coming from constantly spending very small amounts, a few pounds here, a few pounds there, with no kind of consciousness to it. Constantly spending small amounts of money. It's like water dripping from a leaking tap. 1 or 2 drops doesn't make too much of a difference, but over the course of the day, the week, the month, they all start to add up to consistently leaking energy, consistently giving something away. So this won't just be a pattern on monetary spending, right? If we are the leaky tap, the dripping tap, we're probably going to be doing this in other areas of our life. Time, energy, effort, how much we kind of give to someone else, how much we take from someone else. These little drops, 1, 2, 3, not going to notice a difference, but they soon start to add up over the course of the day, the week, the month. So just noticing, a good tip for this, if you don't know if you're a leaky tap or not, is to go through your spending, which might be triggering in itself, but is a good exercise. A few pounds on a coffee, then a few pounds on a sandwich, then a few pounds on this little trinket that you saw in the shop, then a few pounds on something else. You go and buy something else that you didn't actually need, just a little thing, and then an advert comes up on Facebook. Oh, it's only £2, or TikTok, it's only £2. Click, spend. These little things then start to add up because we're not consciously aware, but also because we are so used to having money on tap. And money on tap is helpful because it means that we have freedom. It frees up our time. We've not got to go and get money out of the bank and then go physically buy something and then, hand over the cash. But it also feeds into when you've got a dysregulated nervous system, this dripping tap mentality, because we can suddenly pay for everything on our phone, pay for everything on our credit card, PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all of these things are there to help us spend money, which is great if we are conscious and we know what we're spending it on and we're really intentional with our money and where our energy and our effort and our power is going. But as soon as you start that dripping tap, we're just constantly leaking bits of energy, and our focus, our money, our attention, our time, everything just goes a little bit skew with. I suspect most people will have some form of recognition of this dripping tap, you know, whether it's to do with money or it's to do with something else. You can apply this to whatever you want to apply it to. It's still the nervous system. So just having a moment there, they're three really common cycles: panic buying, feast and famine, and dripping tap. Which one for you stands out the most? Which one do you recognize a lot in yourself? And you can either write this down in your journal, just making a note what initially comes to you, or if you want to share in the chat any reflections that have come up, you are welcome to. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes on that to let it digest and let yourself write down anything that you need to write down, because they're quite pivotal parts of the cycle to understand. So I'll recall you back in just a minute or so. So hopefully that's just given you a moment to reflect on those cycles. I know from my personal experience, the one that I was stuck in the most was the feast and famine. Um, you know, because I couldn't hold the money, because my body couldn't physically hold it. Almost panicked, when it came in. It would be spend, 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 without awareness, sticking my head in the sand. Don't want to see what's in my bank account. Don't need to know. Just spending it. And then when I did check, this real kind of panic realization, real disconnection, and real distrust actually in money in general would come in on the opposite end of the cycle when I would be tightening my belt, and not necessarily ever needing to do that. If I'd have just been better at holding in the middle, recognizing that my nervous system was dysregulated when money came in, having some sort of plan in place, whether that's a somatic plan or a few more steps in place for me to be able to spend money, making maybe it a bit harder for myself to be able to spend, or giving myself some rules or something like that, it would have allowed me to sit with that nervous system state of dysregulation, that anxiety, that panic. Money isn't safe, I need to get rid of it. That story that sat behind it. And I could have sat with it and I could have expanded it. Instead, because I had no idea that that's what I was doing, it was straight in, straight out, and then whittle and panic for the next couple of months about where on earth I'm going to get my money from, how on earth am I going to eat or go out for a meal with my friends, or um, couldn't even think about a holiday because I'd already booked the holiday on the big on the big spends. But there was this kind of recognition that it wasn't in flow and it was either all or nothing. And that's really what we're talking about with nervous system. work. It is, I need to be able to hold it. I need to be able to hold it, recognize when it's time to let go, and recognize when it's time to receive, whilst always creating that somatic safety, that body safety, to be able to allow energy to flow. So, practicals, getting on to some practicals. Once we notice a pattern, once we notice what pattern, what cycle, what story we're in, we need to break it. How do we do that? We do that via our nervous system, via that stretching, by those small little steps, and allowing ourselves to grow over time. So the first thing is we want to notice those patterns. We want to be really clear on what patterns we fall into. That's going to require a little bit of observation on your part. What are my patterns? What do I see myself doing? Do I think I do one thing, but actually when I observe myself, I'm doing something completely different? And once we notice, once we can get to the bottom of the noticing the patterns, we then want to interrupt the patterns as much in the present moment as we can. So all of this work requires us to live a lot more presently and a lot more consciously. It's not about overwhelmed thinking about things. It's about being present in the moment, noticing what the body's doing, noticing what I'm feeling, noticing what's rising to the surface, noticing any tension or tightness, things like that, symptoms, and interrupting the pattern in the moment, bringing yourself back to that cool, calm, and collected in the moment, and then moving forwards. And that takes a lot of practice. So just give yourself some grace as you go through this process, because it's not an easy process to go through, in terms of there's not like a quick switch or an easy fix to it. It's much more about living presently. We want to be conscious when we spend money, basically. We want to be aware. So either making it easier for ourselves or harder for ourselves to spend money, depending on what our pattern is. If we're frozen or fawning, so if we're in that kind of lower dysregulation state of disconnection, we want to be making it easier for ourselves to spend. If we're fighting and flighting, so we're anxious, panicky, and we're leaking money, we want to make it more difficult, right? So where am I? What's my pattern? Do I need to make it harder? Do I need to make it easier? Some practical things to kind of think about. If you're in this anxious state, if you're in this fight and flight, this hyper arousal of leaking, spending too much, giving away too much, take the pay apps off your phone. It will instantly make your life a lot easier. Things like setting spending limits and reviewing regularly. The key for this pattern, to interrupt it, is to be really conscious of what's in your account and not avoiding what is there, not avoiding the reality. Because what can happen with this anxious part of it is we go into an avoidance tactic. So I'm sticking my head in the sand. I'm really anxious about it, but I'm going to stick my head in the sand and ignore all of that external noise, ignore what's actually in there, and never really connect with our money consciously. So things like setting spending limits, reviewing regularly where you're at, using apps where you can track your spending more and make a calendar note to actually check them, not avoid them. Using cash where you can and where you need to budget. I know that it's not always super helpful to use cash. It's not always as convenient, that's for sure. But it adds this extra layer of, I need to just stop, slow down, and do things with more awareness, rather than just this leaky bucket spending that can happen, or this anxious letting go of everything spending. Making spending harder, tracking your money, getting used to paying bills as they arrive as well. So avoiding any avoidance tactics. Bill comes in, I pay it. I let the money go. I free it up. So that you know exactly where you stand. Really, what we're wanting to do with any sort of anxious fight and flight spending, leaky bucket, is to slow it down. Really slow it down. Put more steps in place. Be more mindful with spending. Now, the flip side of that if you're in a hypo aroused state, so this flat, this disconnection, I spend to feel, and the spending gives me a buzz. And it's also that fawning and freezing mode, I'm holding on to everything and grasping onto everything, and I don't trust myself with money. That sort of pattern is also this one. Add online banking or Apple Pay to your phone if you can. So add like an easier layer so that you can listen to the body yeses rather than go by everything from the mind. Kind of doing the reverse, right? Instead of buying and hunting all the time, buying what you actually want. So even if that means saving, putting a pot aside, saving the money, buying what you actually want, because that is what ultimately is going to nourish you. It's going to be what makes you feel held, supported, nourished. It's going to be what makes you happy. Because reality is when we do the bargain hunting part of it, we're not 100% satisfied with what we buy usually. And 9 times out of 10, we end up wanting to buy or wishing we'd have bought the other thing and just waited in the first place. I love this tip that I got from someone when I did a course. Starting a joy bank. So having a little pot of money, a bit like a piggy bank, a bit like an old-fashioned piggy bank, but having some sort of pot that you can put money into. This is my joy spending, and I'm only going to spend this on things that give me joy. It's not for bills, it's not for boring stuff. It is my joy pot. I use it for sunshine, happiness, and things that make me feel good and feel happy and feel nourished. And actually spending it. So not just being in that freeze mode of I'm saving, but just in another pot. You do actually have to spend it to feel the joy at the same time. Also, watching your language. Watching yourself when you're saying, is it a treat? Or, oh, I've deserved that. Or this is a treat. What you're actually saying is, this is nourishing my body. This is giving me something. And being okay with receiving that nourishment from yourself, because that's ultimately what we're saying when we're having a treat. I feel worthy to spend money on myself. So just say I spend money. I feel worthy of spending money on myself, and I need to nourish myself in this, mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever that looks like. Spending money more mindfully and adding a few quicker ways to purchase when your body is saying yes, because the disconnect with the hypoarousal, so this freeze and fawn state, is the body is saying yes, but our mind is getting in the way of the actual spending and the nourishment. You will definitely, Jenna, higher. You will definitely go between these states for sure, because that's also the freeze and fawn. Uh, that's also the fight, flight, freeze, fawn part of it. What you ultimately need to be doing is recognizing in them in the moment and then doing the opposite or being with them. I'm noticing myself doing that, so I need to put the steps in place in that moment to allow myself to not fall into the same pattern, because otherwise what's happening usually is it's unconscious spending. Both of these types are unconscious spending. So I need to be more conscious, I need to be more mindful, and I've got a few tips on how we can do that as well. And also share. If other people have tips on this that come to them, please do share. Use the chat box. Yeah. As I say, it's really common to flip between two. Because it's what tends to happen with a dysregulated nervous system is we go from how you would kind of describe it in very simple terms is we go from anxious to down, depressed, flat, then to anxious again, then to down, depressed, flat. So what we want to get to is the point in the middle. Before we get back to the anxious or before we get back down to the depressed, flat, we want to be sitting in the middle with it. How can I sit in the middle with it and recognize that I'm feeling this way and bring myself back to the somatics, which we're going to do in a second. So, how can I break the cycles when I'm in it? The somatics are really where it sits. The somatics for helping soothe the nervous system on the go are actually very simple. This is not complicated at all. It requires you, though, to be aware and to be mindful. You can't think about it ahead of time. You know, I can't think myself into regulation. I have to feel myself into regulation in that moment. So this is why the slowing down is really important. Being more conscious, being more mindful. So first of all, in that state, how is your breath? So let's say you're in an anxious state of spending, you're leaking money all over the place. As you're spending, what's your breath doing? Can you take a moment, slow down your breath? Belly breathe. So breathe into your belly. Allow your belly to expand. Allow your chest to expand. Take a nice deep breath. Can I be more controlled with my breath? Do I need to add in a little bit of like yogic ujjayi breath where you kind of restrict your throat slightly and make that beautiful ocean soothing sound? Do I need to count my breath? Do I need to either count my breath in and my breath out, or do I need to count to 10 and then let the money go? And maybe I change in that moment. Tension. Where do you feel tension in that moment? Jaw, hands. You know, you might literally be gripping onto your money. You might literally be gripping onto your card or your phone. Relax your hands, stretch your toes, stretch your shoulders. Belly breathing allows the belly to expand. Hips, moving them off, shaking them off, allowing your body to express and to move. If you watch a dog, or any other animal, but a dog, I've got a dog beside me, so that's the easiest one to go with. They are very good at regulating their nervous system. They will have a trigger, and then within a few seconds of the trigger going, you will see them stretch, they'll stretch their jaw, they'll shake, they'll move their body, and that's them just getting rid of the tension, getting rid of the stress, getting rid of the anxiety. You know, that's really what humans need to be better at doing, but we're going so fast normally that we're not recognizing these things within ourselves, and so we can't actually work with them. Being with sensations as well, you know, what am I feeling and how can I remind myself that in this moment I am safe? Yes, I'm handing over money. Yes, I might be handing over more money than I want to hand over, but I am safe, I am supported, all whilst stretch, yawn, slowing down the breath, being very present with the action of spending, with the action of money. Yeah, she shakes, exactly. So watching how an animal does it, you know, it's exactly the same. We are animals. We're no different from them. Our nervous system is still stuck in caveman times. It hasn't upgraded since. We still think we're running away from saber-toothed tigers and God knows what else was going on. And we need to recognize that those triggers are just, even though the thing has changed, so it's not a saber-toothed tiger anymore, it's handing over a few £100 on the credit card, the actual triggers are still the same. How our body reacts is still the same. And so therefore, how we get rid of that tension, how we get rid of that stress is also the same. But the key, the massive key for all of this is to do it in the moment where you can, which takes that practice of being with your body, being with what's going on. So, you know, just kind of wrapping up some of these top tips, creating pots of money, making friends with your finances, getting to know them, being curious and asking questions of your money. You know, where is it going? What am I spending it on? Or where am I not spending it? Where my body is saying, I really need this. This is really going to help me. Start working much more closely with money and value. Our own self-worth and our own the things that we value about ourselves or our own sense of self-value um, is largely linked to how we spend as well. So, for example, if we believe that we've always got to earn rest, spending money on things that give us rest is probably going to feel quite triggering because the belief behind it is that I need to have earned that. And so our self-value, our self-worth is massively wrapped up in all of this. Um, and it's worth reflecting on because of that. You know, how do I feel about myself? Um, and is that affecting the way that I spend? Really honing in on habits as well. Apps can help with tracking, or you can do it manually. You know, what are my spending habits? Looking at conscious versus unconscious debts. So conscious debts are things like mortgages, um, credit cards where you've been very aware that you're spending money for a certain thing, you know, not just whacking everything on credit cards, but um, you know, let's say I need this home improvement and I need to be able to borrow that money. I have a set plan to be able to pay it off. That is a conscious debt. That is you being aware of the debt that you're in versus unconscious, which is this pattern that we get ourselves into where we're kind of just spending willy-nilly again, you know, everything's whacked on credit cards. I've got subscriptions coming out of my ears. I've signed up to this program that's 12 months long, even though I probably are, I'm not going to make it past 2 or 3 months. All of these things are the more unconscious debts. Watching your language, again, coming back to the worthiness, you know, you don't need to call it a treat. You don't need to say that you need to earn it. It's that, is it giving me something? Is it feeding me? And digging in and really getting to know your energy is really going to help. So, this is one of my favorite little bits to go through. How good are you at receiving? How good are you at receiving a compliment is a good place to start. Now, if you are good at receiving a compliment, someone pays you a compliment, you say thank you allow it to nourish you. You allow it to make you feel good, you know. Oh, your hair looks nice. Oh, thank you. You know, that's actually made me feel really nice inside. That's given me a bit of warmth. Or are you someone that when you receive a compliment, instantly it gets battered back away? You know, oh, your hair looks nice. Oh, what this? I brushed it. Yeah, it looks. Yeah, yeah. I just brushed it. I think I just this rebuttal, right? That is not allowing yourself to receive and be nourished by receiving. It's exactly the same for money. The way that we receive money, and so what I'm talking about in that sense is things like pay rises, money that we've won, tombolas, lottery, but also if you're running your own business, the amount of money that you put on your services or your products. Because if you're not great at receiving things like compliments, the likelihood is you're not going to be accepting of receiving money as easily either. And so you are most likely making receiving money a little bit more difficult for yourself than it needs to be. Because ultimately it comes back to this conversation about self-worth. You know, do I feel like I am worthy of it? And if the old pattern and old belief behind that is, no, you need to have earned it, you need to have worked really hard, you don't deserve that. That's just repeating the same pattern and going, every time I need to receive something, I'm sending it back. I'm sending it back out there. Some really kind of obvious ways that that can happen is you know, someone tells you that your services are, or they pay more for your services. someone saying that they'd pay more for your products, oh, this is cheap, you should put your prices up. Oh no, I can't possibly do that. Sending it back. They're saying that this is something that's given me a lot of value, given me a lot of value. You should be able to receive from that, it should be able to fuel you and make you feel good. And it's worth looking along at that alongside traditional jobs, um, pay rises, bonuses, um, because traditionally women aren't great at asking for pay rises. That's really where a lot of the gender pay gap comes from. Men are great at asking for pay rises. As a general overarching rule, men are a lot better at asking for it because they're not questioning their self-worth as much. And so how can we start to work on that self-worth and remind ourselves that we are worthy of receiving? So this really starts with practicing receiving in terms of, I want you to really be conscious of the compliments that people pay you on a day-to-day basis. There will be some. I know some people are sat there thinking, oh, I can't remember the last time I got a compliment. There 100% will be some. And if there aren't any, you're hanging around with the wrong people. Because we want to practice this receiving, what it feels like to receive, and creating body safety, letting it nourish us when we receive simple things like compliments, because it will also help us with that rhythm and that flow of our energy, money-wise as well, because we're feeling nourished, that recognizing our worth. So to go into some kind of nitty-gritties of this, hopefully everyone's got their astrology chart. If you haven't, you can find it for free on my website. If you go to thehumblewarrior.co.uk, astrology at the top, and then it says like free astrology chart or something. It's the first one, I think. You can pull your free astrology chart for there. The first thing I want to just look at is the Venus placement. And why I think these are important is it shows us what we actually need in terms of nourishment. What is nourishment to us as an individual, because it looks very different for everyone. So have a look where your Venus is. So Venus is, I should have probably told you what Venus looks like. Venus is a circle with like a cross underneath it. If you can see this card, there we go. It is a circle with a cross underneath it, but no horns. So Mercury has horns, Venus does not have horns. Perfect. In Gemini, in ninth house. Keep that in mind, Kirsty. So, Venus in the signs. I'm not so bothered about where she is in the houses, but Venus in the signs. What does this look like? How is this nourishment? If you've got Venus in Aries, new experiences over things, allowing yourself to try new things, allowing yourself to be seasonal, allowing yourself to spend on experiences and investing in experiences, being bold, being adventurous. And just that side note, if you're always wanting new things, how can you recycle the old things to create that energy flow? Venus in Taurus is more about material things, luxury everyday items, rest days, buying with long-term things in mind. So it might mean that you have to save a little bit more because you're wanting to spend on slightly more expensive items, for example. Prioritizing comfort, not bargains. Handcrafted things, letting yourself be nourished by how things look, the aesthetics, how things look is going to be really important to Venus in Taurus. Venus in Gemini is going to be more about community and learning matters. So investing in courses, investing in learning opportunities, these are the things that are going to nourish you and give you that joy, that feeling of contentment, that feeling of joy. Spending on social activities, anything that connects you with people and cultures is going to be a winner for Venus in Gemini. So letting yourself spend on those things. Venus in Cancer is all about home comforts. Venus in Cancer realistically is just going to want to spend on home and safety of the home. making things comfortable, making things supported, making things space, and also probably going to want to spend on family and friends as well. So this is maybe noticing the difference between people pleasing spending and Venus in Cancer spending, which is I actually get real joy from spending money on my friends and family because it really nourishes me. Whereas people pleasing is because I should or because I think I should. Venus in Leo is all about creativity, creative pursuits, taking adventures, expressing yourself. So spending money on clothes, spending money on hair, spending money on nails, really expressing yourself through uh, the aesthetics of things, and creative pursuits. So I'm kind of thinking art classes, pottery. I think we've got a potter on here. Go buy a pottery if you're a Venus in Leo. Um, Venus in Virgo is about the little things. I can speak on this with a little bit more detail because this is me. It's about making sure that the things that you buy are really good quality, that you spend a little bit on the details. You spend maybe a little bit more on the nice journal, the renewable journal that's not a cheap, tacky one. It's the nice one that's going to last you a really long time. It's very similar to Taurus in that way, but elevating the everyday, not buying the cheap coffee, buying the nice coffee that you actually like rather than saving a few quid on the cheap coffee that you're not even going to enjoy when you drink it. It's those little things, with Venus in Virgo. I love making my life easier. I call it buying time. Yeah, exactly. Venus in Virgo is all about that yeah, time element. I love that. And then the other six, Venus in Libra, quality, always quality. Venus in Libra is always going to want the best. Very similar to Taurus, actually, in that sense, because they're both ruled by Venus. So Venus is in its natural home in Libra. You're going to want the best. Save the money for it. Forget buying the cheaper option. Because all that's also doing is that reminder of I am not worthy. I'm telling myself that same story again, that I am not worthy, and you'll just end up spending twice when you inevitably need to upgrade something. Venus in Scorpio is really what are you passionate about? I need to spend on things that I'm really passionate about, going deeper, being transformative, experiences, investments in like intimate brands, little things, retreats, things like that, retreats, workshops, anything where people are getting cozy and intimate together. You're going to want to go deep. So, how can I spend or how can I use my money to nourish me to go deeper into things and go below the surface? So, an example of that would be don't keep taking freebie offerings, for example. It won't leave you feeling satisfied because you're not going to get the depth from a free thing that you would do from a paid thing, and just allowing yourself to go a little bit deeper and building that body safety. Venus in Sagittarius is all about travel, adventure, learning. So as long as you're spending on those things, you're ultimately going to leave yourself open to receive and feeling nourished. Venus in Capricorn is very practical, long-term investments. They'd make great financial advisors, realistically. Venus is in Capricorn. Investing in quality, also prioritizing spending on what's going to help you personally over long term. This is all about long-term growth, seeing the bigger picture, seeing the longer term. Venus in Aquarius is bringing people together using money, so creating experiences between people. Considering where you're spending your money as well, because brand ethics are going to be important for the nourishment. You're going to want to spend behind a brand that gives you value for money, but also feels like it's doing something better than, say, like the I don't know. A good example of this would be on a high street. Probably want to spend in the small independent compared to the big chain. If we're thinking about coffee shops or art shops or whatever, small independent, supporting people rather than supporting corporation, supporting causes and doing good with money. And then the Venus in Pisces is all about spiritual development and creativity. So how can I basically, do I get enough of those things? Because these are things that some people, Venus in Capricorn is probably going to look at a Venus in Pisces and go, what on earth are you spending money on that for? They're just mismatched. So allowing yourself to spend money on that development, that spiritual development, emotional development, creative development, no, it might not go anywhere. It doesn't matter. You're not going in with that long-term hat. You're going in with things that make you feel nourished. Sharon, yeah, are you Venus in Aquarius not wanting to go to Starbucks? That's a good example. Um, so first of all, when you look at those, do you notice these impulses, but stop yourself from spending on them? So let's say your Venus in Sagittarius, travel really lights you up, learning things really lights you up, knowledge really lights you up, but your head gets in the way of, oh, I can't go on that trip. Instead of put the practical things in place, maybe I just need to save a little bit more. Maybe I just need to put a plan in place. Maybe I need to open a pot so my money just siphons off a little portion of my income each month siphons off to this pot, and before I know it, I've got enough money to do it. Where does our head get in the way? Your body should be leading, not your mind or your dysregulation. And when we don't follow our natural spending urges, when it's safe to do so, we're denying ourselves from nourishment. And it's just like a physical form of nourishment. What happens when we deny ourselves nourishment from food, for example? We end up hungry. We end up taking anything from anywhere. It doesn't feel good, might upset our system, and it just doesn't work. It's just not healthy and not helpful. The other thing in terms of astrology is this second house. Now, what you will see on your astrology chart is your second house. It might have some planets in it. We're not necessarily looking at that, but it will cover one of the zodiac signs. So have a look where your second house is. You'll have your rising sign, you'll have first house, and then you'll have second house. Because your second house is providing support. So we've talked about nourishment from Venus, which is a type of support, but now we're talking about physical support. When these needs aren't being met of where our second house is, we're going to be more susceptible to dysregulation and our cyclical spending habits. So that's like the feast and famine, for example, or the leaky tap. Because we're not being supported, we're not being held, we don't feel safe ultimately, and the second house is providing safety for us. So what actually makes us feel safe? If your second house is in Aries, you're going to feel safe from variety, from change, from wanting to do different things, taking opportunities, changing things up, having a bit of flavour and adding a bit of spice to life. You're not going to get support and stability from staying the same all the time. If your second house covers Taurus, you're going to get support from the luxury versions of things. This does mean that you're going to need some spending things in place, but what it usually means is that it's that less is more. I don't need all of the things. I just need the really good quality things. And again, leaning into that. So these two, the Venus part and the second house, should come together a bit like a yin and yang. The nourishment from Venus versus the support from the second house. Blend those two together and you'll get your own unique mix of what you actually need to feel safe, supported, and nourished. Second house in Gemini, learning and expanding your knowledge, connection with friends, connection with community. In Cancer, you're going to get connection, you're going to get support from comfort, you're going to get support from your home, you're going to get support from family. So spending money on your home and how things look in your home, creating a nest, creating a sanctuary, letting yourself enjoy your sanctuary, creating it exactly how you need so it can support you. You know, an example of that would be you get home from a long day at work or day out with people, or you're just drained. You need the support of your home if you're a second house Cancer to be able to hold you, to be able to re-regulate. If your second house is in Leo, this is all about your image, your clothing, how you look, letting yourself shine, letting yourself stand out. You'll get support, you'll feel supported when you lean into your uniqueness, when you're second house Leo. With Virgo, you get support from planning and saving, understanding your money, letting yourself budget, letting yourself analyze, letting yourself look at the details of purchases, and also like Taurus, that buying quality over quantity. The really good stuff. You want the really good stuff. Because when we scrimp and we save on these things, we're not actually really nourishing. They're not nourishing us. We're keeping reaffirming that pattern that we don't deserve. And we'll just keep seeing that pattern playing out because we keep reaffirming it. Second house in Libra is about beauty and about luxury again, aesthetics, letting your eyes be nourished. It's got to be nourishing on the eyes. It's got to look good. So letting yourself be a little bit picky with that. Let yourself be a little bit shallow if that's what people want to call it, you know, because actually you're being supported. Your body feels safe when it looks good, when it looks nice. Scorpio, things that make you feel. So second house is Scorpio, things that make you feel, things that you can attach to, knowing the story behind things, things that will need to have meaning. If they don't have meaning, they're not going to support you. Not frivolous or aesthetic, but deep. Not so concerned about how it looks. Wanted to get to the depths of something, being supported by the deeper meaning to something. The Sagittarius part is about freedom, travel, adventure. I mean, 3 words that are always going to sum up any sort of Sagittarius placement: freedom, travel, and adventure. Capricorn, again, the practicality. So second house in Capricorn, to be supported, I need to have the practicals in place. I need to have the financials in place. I need to have a safe amount of money in the bank, working out what my safe amount of money is. I need to have that kind of foundation in place. And also noticing, you know, where that can then flip into unhealthy habits with freezing and holding on to too much. So there's so many subtle complexities to these. Aquarius will need a feel-good factor. I'll need to feel good. Support comes when I feel good, when I've given my money to a charity, or when I'm doing something that creates a bigger picture. You know, maybe I've volunteered my time, maybe I've given something away, whatever it is. Ethical spending and supporting causes that you care for is going to support you, it's going to make you feel good. Under Pisces, second house in Pisces, creativity, play, freedom, mystery, not taking things too seriously and going with the flow a little bit. Some form of financial freedom will therefore be important so that you can move with how you feel, so that you can be supported with how you feel, not necessarily what you think about. There should only be one second house, Jenna. So on your chart, there will be a segment that says second house. It will be the second one after your rising sign. So I'm not sure what your rising sign is, but we could work it out from that. And you're looking at basically what zodiac sign is within that second house. So, for example, mine would be I'm a Virgo rising, so my second house is Libra because it's the next one along. I hope that helps. So what are the steps now to heal? This is all the information. This is all the head work, right? This is all the information that we need. The healing, however, happens in the moment. So this is the task now. How can I start to work with this information in the moment to allow myself to heal my money wounds and use my money more consciously, more powerfully, whether it's 1 pence, £1, £10,000, £1,000,000, whatever it is that you have access to. How can I use it more consciously, more aware, and more helpfully to support myself? Recognizing your current patterns is going to be the first step. What am I doing with it? Where is it going? Or where is it not going? And what are processing your stories and beliefs? What are the stories that sit behind it? What are the beliefs that sit behind it? That was week 1. So if you're thinking, what's she on about? That was our week 1 topic. Making peace with our past. Even though we've been there and done that, and they were the stories of the past, doesn't mean that we need to carry them to the stories of the future. We get the opportunity to rewrite the story rather than getting stuck in it. Consciously working with patterns, being present, being mindful in the way that we live, being mindful in the way that we spend. And in that consciousness, bringing in that somatic safety. Oh, I can feel myself getting anxious when I'm paying for this thing on my credit card. I need to breathe a little bit more slowly. I need to stretch my fingers and not grip onto my card so tight. I need to ground myself and root myself and stand on both feet as I'm paying. And I just need to breathe. Maybe have a conversation with the cashier rather than getting a bit spiky or a bit agitated. Slow the process down so that you can actually feel things, acknowledge them, recognize them, label them, but ultimately remind yourself that I am safe in this moment and I do not really need to be feeling these things. It's not true. It's a pattern that's coming back up. And then when you're doing that, bringing in that nourishment and working on receiving the compliment part. How good are you at receiving a compliment? How can I get better at receiving so that I'm leaving myself more open to receiving other types of energy as well? And I think this last question is really a good one to keep in your mind going forwards. With all of this in mind, what do I actually need from my money? How can I start to make it work for me? So with that second house placement, with that Venus placement, what do I actually need from my money? And how can I start to let it support me and nourish me and feed me so that I'm not getting into these patterns quite so much? Yay! Have I done it? Oh, I have done it on time again. And I'm getting better at these. A little pat on the back for myself. I think the last thing really for me to say is well done. Any sort of nervous system work, and especially money, as we saw last week in the kind of history of women and money and having access to their own finances, it's hard work. It's triggering work, it's hard work. It really asks us to look at ourselves on a deeper level. It asks us to be really honest with ourselves and vulnerable. So massive well done for undertaking it in the first place, and making it to the end of week 2. And really keeping in mind those practicals going forwards. That's where the healing is going to come from. You've got all the information. You don't need to learn any more about it. You just need to do it. So for all of you human design 1 lines, forget about going down the rabbit hole for now. Put into practice what you've got and start to really work with that somatic part of it, that nervous system part of it, so that you can stretch and hold more and flow more. So as always, I'm open to questions. Feel free to use the chat box. Feel free to take yourself off mute if you want to take yourself off mute and ask questions. I'm going to end the recording so that questions aren't recorded.